Well, just to kind of zoom in a bit more on this situation around European and Chinese relations, because I mean, like you said, it's a very long-term relationship, but in recent years, that has been under quite a lot of strain because of US interference, I would say. For example, things like EU, China strategic investments have been put on ice. There's been diplomatic issues and rhetoric. And like you've just said, that you kind of observe a bit of a shift at the moment in terms of rhetoric. So what I wanted to sort of just ask you, like, how much do you think this is now more of a genuine shift away from those more kind of unstable relations that we've seen in recent years? So with Trump coming back into office, that there have been rumblings of rifts between the EU and the United States, particularly in light of the recent erratic tariff policies. So do you believe the signals that there are reflect a genuine shift? And how much do you think this is going to allow for a more amicable EU-China relationship?
Well, very good question. I would say, I'm not 100% sure you alluded, because, there are obviously US pressure in the beginning that tried to pressure EU to distance from China as a precondition in EU-US trade talks. But, it's not going to serve EU's interest. China's view is that everyone should have good relation. We want EU have good relation with US, and we want good relation with everyone else too. So including EU, obviously, and the US. So I don't know why, US would always want, drive a wedge. It's China's belief is a win-win cooperation. But, there was some sort of a politician, I wouldn't name names, but, in EU talking, it was actually agreeing, like joining the US on a bandwagon to sort of contain China or deal with China in trade or even in geopolitics. But I think obviously the European, they learned the first hard lesson in the first Trump administration when Trump punished the EU for continue trade with Iran after, Trump pulled out JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. They had a hard lesson. But when Biden came, they thought, oh, yeah, I mean, we can just wait it out, people like Trump. But now Trump came back. If you remember, European public opinion poll during the US election is, if I remember correctly, the vast majority want a Democrat to win, and they didn't want Trump. So obviously they are hugely disappointed, but they now realize this so-called abnormal phenomena in the US may not be that abnormal. It could become a permanent feature in US politics. This unilateralism, protectionism, or sort of, they're going, US may not be their babysitter or security guarantor. So you are on your own. I mean, listen what Vice President J.D. Vance told European in Munich or even in recent conversations. It's kind of harsh. I would say there was another second round of a wake up for Europeans. I mean, there was a lot of talk about even de-risking. I mean, you think de-risking from China, they are talking about the de-risking from the United States too. So they don't want to be hijacked by Washington. But the mood, obviously, the Atlantic relation is not that so easy to de-risk. I mean, talking about the U.S. military presence here, in Germany, in other parts of Europe, about NATO's European members. So it will take a long time, and I think some still think they can wait it out by 2029 when Trump is gone. But, some people still harbor that kind of dream. So it's complicated, I would say. There is no verdict, I would say, yet. But yes, I mean, I think they realize, because EU economy is really in bad shape. If you look at Germany, I mean, the largest EU economy suffered 2 years of consecutive recession and is expecting zero growth this year. And so they realize that there is so much actually win-win opportunity between China and the EU, and the confrontational policy would not work. That's why they actually, we heard a lot about China. The EU had this imposed punitive tariff on China's EVs. But the good thing is that lately both sides agreed to move to a so-called minimum price mechanism. So there will not be a punitive tariffs anymore. I mean, they are still negotiating, of course, but they actually agreed to negotiate a minimum price mechanism. So that's better than tit for tat tariff because if European punish Chinese EVs, we're going to push back, I mean, on their cognac, on everything else, maybe.